Good morning, gang. It is Wednesday. It's February 13th. It's 2019, and here is the top story on the Drudge Report. National debt tops $22 trillion. This is what we were talking about yesterday. But I also said I was going to talk about some of the other things in upcoming podcasts, and here we go. Record 7 million 90 days late on car payments right here. Let's take a look at that. Now, this is from the Seattle Times. Now, I know that the mainstream media and the government and Trump and everyone keeps saying how awesome our economy is and everything. We've talked about this on podcasts gone by, but it's just not true. It's a lie. It's fake. It's false. Uh, and this is evidence of that. 7 million Americans are 3 months behind on car payments. 3 months is when you lose your car. That's when the repo man shows up at your work or your home to come take the car back. But very disturbing information here, and it's worse than it was in 2010. So how do we deal with this? How does America deal with 7 million people about to have their cars repossessed, or 7 million cars about to be repossessed? Well, they'll probably not repossess 7 million cars, but how do we deal with it? How did we deal with this, basically in 2008? Well, we bailed out the auto manufacturers and we bailed out the banks. That's how we dealt with it. Here's the U.S. national debt clock again. It's ticked over to 22 trillion now, and it's not even 24 hours since the last video, but that's what we did. We added to the national debt. We literally printed money out of nothing, and then we handed the debt to the taxpayers. That's how we dealt with it. Should we deal with it again that way? Probably. We're probably going to do it again that way. We'll just go ahead and give free money to the auto manufacturers and the banks and give the debt to the American taxpayer, raising the national debt again. So, like I said, these numbers are stratospheric now. And that's the only thing left to do in the Keynesian economic model. There's really very little else they can do. The lower interest rates, that's coming. I don't know when, if it's going to come, literally in March, literally next month, or in June, or possibly in September. I don't know what month it's coming, but I think they're going to have to bring the interest rates down pretty quick now. They didn't have enough time to raise them as high as they wanted to, so they've run out of bullets. Basically, I'm talking about the Federal Reserve running out of bullets to actually deal with these crises as they keep popping up one at a time. But we're not done yet. I'm not going to extend this podcast much more. I want to focus pretty much here on the auto market here. But this is an auto market story. This is an economy story. And it will not be billed as such. I doubt stuff like this will make it to the mainstream. But this is true, and I've been watching this for literally over 6 months, because about 6 months ago, it was, I believe, 4 million Americans were 90 days or more behind on their auto loan payments. Now it's 7. It's getting worse, despite the fact for the last 6 months it's been drilled into our heads by the mainstream media, by the U.S. Treasury, by the Federal Reserve, by the President of the United States, how brilliant our economy is. It is not. They are not telling the truth. It's that simple. So basically, like Hitler said, the bigger the lie and the more often you tell it, the more people will believe it. The economy is not good. We talked about a little bit about gold and silver yesterday. We'll talk about crypto in the future as well. But there are ways to steel yourself for what's coming. Prepping supplies, things of that nature. These are all important. These are things everyone needs to be thinking about. But I just wanted to bring this to your attention because this number did tick over. It's done. We're now at $22 trillion. And that's not just a psychological barrier. That also puts it at approximately 1.25% or 1.25 times GDP. What that means is we owe more than, or basically 1.25 times what our national GDP is yearly. That's what our debt is. This is usually when austerity hits European countries, when they hit that level, when the IMF comes in, starts giving orders, starts telling people how they can live, starts telling the government how they spend. That's usually how when that happens. Now, I'm not sure that's going to happen instantaneously to us here in America because we are the world reserve currency. But it is interesting that we've hit that number. In European countries, when they hit this number, they get in big trouble. But they are part of a larger community, the EU, the Eurozone, and we'll talk about that sometime again real soon. But we are not. We are out on our own. We have the Federal Reserve, we have the U.S. dollar. So how much longer can we actually keep this thing going? We'll see. We'll see how much longer we can keep it going. But a lot of people were saying about 2 months, or I'm sorry, about 2 years ago, 22 trillion is pretty much where a lot of people would start waking up. The IMF would start putting out stern warnings to the United States about its debt levels, and that there would be a possibility of austerity. Austerity on our side would mean something like uh, bringing the interest rates back down to zero, printing more money, the possibility of hyperinflation, or at least big inflation. So I don't want to say the hyperinflation thing yet. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet, but big inflation is coming. We already have inflation in the United States. They lie about those numbers too. The Federal Reserve wants everyone to believe inflation's at 2%. We'll do an entire podcast on inflation levels and how they've lied to us about them. Um, it's very important for people to understand that nominal confusion because those who actually purchase things, those who go to the grocery store, those who actually, buy a car, that's a really good example too, know that there's no way the inflation's at 2% a year. It's much, much higher than that. But if they tell you it's 2%, you'll believe it, especially if they keep telling you over and over and over again. John Williams at Shadow Stats suggests that it's much higher, possibly 10%, maybe even just a tad more. And we're talking about an aggregate number, but it is something to keep in mind. I'd like to thank everyone for spending a little time with us today. Keep in mind that the economy is not what it seems. We could even talk about the stock market here. The stock markets haven't opened here. It's about 7:30 in the morning here, but these are the numbers from yesterday. We can take a look real quick at the implied open, go to the pre-markets, and it looks like the implied open is once again a wonderful green day, here for the United States stock markets. This is an illusion, gang. This whole thing with the stock market, it is not real. It may seem real because they're actual real numbers. And by the way, 25,000 for the Dow, what that actually represents is $25 trillion in valuation for the Dow Jones. All the stocks in the Dow together, the aggregate, equal roughly 25 trillion 425 billion 0.76 million. That's what that number represents. And it's the same thing for the NASDAQ. It's not 7,000, it's 7 trillion 414 billion. And the S&P is 2 trillion 744 billion, as you see those numbers up there. So that's what they actually represent. Many people don't know that, but that's the valuation of all the stocks within the S&P, the NASDAQ, and the Dow. These numbers, just like I said, aren't reality. And we'll do, like I said, a podcast specifically focusing on those numbers and what's happening with the Exchange Stabilization Fund at a later date. But once again, thank you very much for taking a few minutes out to listen to us today. We're always happy to have you. Please like, share, and subscribe. And let your friends and your neighbors know about us a little bit. Basically, we're here to kind of open people's eyes. We are not a monetized channel. We're never going to be a monetized channel. We're just here to open people's eyes a little bit to what's going on in the economy. Again, thank you for spending your time with us. Have a wonderful day.